6, 5, flame deflector activated, 4, 3, 2, 1, engine ignition. And movement, we have liftoff of Starship Flight 6.
No boost back this time.
And a great ascent of the rocket so far, now coming up on a minute into flight. Starship approaching max Q, the point of peak aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Some great tracking shots by the teams at La Padre and Spaceflight now. Call for max Q. We're coming upon a few different events in fairly rapid succession. We'll see for the Super Heavy booster MECO, which in this case is most engines cut off, then the hot staging for the stage separation, then the Super Heavy boost back burn will start at about T plus 2 minutes and 44 seconds. Good flight so far, all 33 Raptors on the booster. Continuing a good burn so far. Less than 30 seconds to MECO. SpaceX monitoring to see if they are going to go forward with the catch today. Approaching MECO. And you see MECO there. Hot staging. SpaceX confirms that the tower is go for catch. Ignition on the ship upper stage. Some good on camera or on ship views. Or this is the Super Heavy booster, one of those hypersonic grid fins there. Now nearly 4 minutes into flight. Boost back burn shutdown has occurred. Booster has been sounds like there may be an offshore diversion, which means sounds like not going to see SpaceX go for the Super Heavy booster catch. So the Super Heavy booster will be landing in the waters of the Gulf of Mexico. They are not going to be attempting a tower catch today. SpaceX said in the run-up to this mission, this was always a possibility that if all of the commit criteria were not in alignment on both the Super Heavy booster as well as the tower, that they would not go for a catch, and that is what we have here today. We're continuing to track the Super Heavy booster as it makes its descent. That little white dot at the base of the box on the right-hand side of your screen, that is the hot stage ring that was jettisoned. Now T plus 5 minutes, 41 seconds into the count. The landing burn should be starting in less than a minute on the Super Heavy booster. SpaceX will, of course, continue to get good flight data from the Super Heavy booster, even though it is not in a position for them to make a catch attempt today. This tracking view from the perspective of South Padre Island, and this from due west of the launch pad. So we're coming up on the landing burn start. Now landing burn underway. And a splashdown in the Gulf of Mexico of the Super Heavy booster B-13. And the booster has exploded on the water. So for those joining once again, SpaceX waved off a catch attempt of the Super Heavy booster, instead opting to have a water splashdown instead. So you can see the ship upper stage still continuing on with its flight, though, now T plus 7 minutes, 41 seconds in real time, 7:29 on the SpaceX feed.
Days, and you can add a few more to that. Since then, so a launch every 2 days seems to be something that they can sustain over a number of weeks or months, and potentially even a year or years down the road. So I would bet a similar number, maybe a few more launches in 2025 than they saw in 2024. Of course, they're going to fall a little short of the goal, I believe, of 144 launches this year, primarily due to their stand downs after they were grounded for a period of time. They could not launch Falcon 9s for several weeks when you combine those two stand downs together. So that did, cost them the chance of reaching 144 missions. So I would bet they'll try to go for 144 or maybe some more next year. I do think that I may be wrong. We'll see what SpaceX says publicly, but I have a hunch that we won't see significantly more Falcon 9 launches next year. Not doubling the launch cadence as we saw in previous years, because I think they're close to what they can do with Falcon 9 and the infrastructure they have at the various launch sites in Florida and California. And also, once Starship is flying at a high cadence, it's going to start launching Starlink satellites, and that's going to take away a lot of the demand signal for Falcon 9.
Yeah, certainly Starlink has been far and away the most.
So almost 200 kilometers. This is outside the ship. Yep, they're in.
We're now T plus 34 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. As we're awaiting the planned relight test, do want to bring you really interesting pictures here. We'll go ahead and bring in this additional shot from the vantage point of South Padre Island. You can still see the Super Heavy booster bobbing there in the waters of the Gulf of Mexico. What's left of it, at least. Appears there's a little bit of a flame there near the part that's sticking furthest out of the water. We know that from previous Flight 4, they were able to salvage part of the engine section of the Super Heavy booster. Zach, I'll go to you on this one. Given that it appears that we've got most of or a good chunk of the booster intact, and it may be, once it's safe to try to salvage it, how important is it to get back as much of the hardware as they're able to?
Well, I think, but we're going to aim for that and hopefully see this relay test coming on in about a minute. It's just going to be one of these engines, and it uses what's called the header tank. So these small spherical tanks in the very top of Starship, up in the nose cone. They don't require nearly as much gas to pressurize as your main tank, so they're really useful for any in-orbit maneuvers, and then for landing burn. So if we make it to a landing burn today, we'll be using them for that as well. So we should be coming up in just about the next minute. Should be under a minute now away from that expected ship burn. And again, we've relit Raptors pretty frequently. We just did it with the landing burn and that boost back burn on the booster, and we've done it on ship landing burns. We just haven't done it in this microgravity environment where your propellant management and a lot of other things are different, as you're not weighed down with the force of Earth's gravity. And just heard the call out for startup. There's some light. There's that Raptor relit. And shut down. All right, there you have it. The first time ever lighting a Raptor while in outer space, other than our ascent burn. So taking the brunt of all of that heat as you're coming in from well in excess of 10,000 miles an hour. That's all going to build up a lot of heat as you're encountering an increasing atmosphere, building up that friction. And we're going to see how the tiles fare. We've also got some pretty cool tile experiments that we'll talk about in a little bit. But coming up real soon, ship re-entry, successful relight, and we'll start this entry part soon.
And as we approach minute 40 into this flight, a good update from SpaceX and a demonstration of that relight. One box ticked as they continue on with this Starship Flight 6. So Stephen, bringing you back here on that point, obviously this is something that both SpaceX and NASA really wanted to see, and you have to imagine they're pretty happy, at least with this point in the mission with that relight. And obviously they'll go through the data and learn as much as they can about it, but your quick takeaway on that brief relight demonstration we just saw.
Yeah, everything looked to be nominal as expected with that relight, and even though it was just a couple of seconds, we knew it was going to be very brief. So we saw the velocity change, a slight increase in velocity, so adding some speed and energy to the vehicle, and so everything looks to be nominal. Next up is re-entry. I think that relight was a big moment, not to be understated. Even though visually it's not as spectacular as the launch or hot staging or catch, certainly don't want to minimize any of those. But in order to get to this applications phase that I was talking about earlier, versus experimental flight tests, which we've seen on the first 6 flights of Starship, that burn really needed to go well, and early indications are that the burn did go well.
They could certainly enter the atmosphere. Yep.
Certainly appeared to go as well as they were, although we're already starting to see some of the plasma buildup around the ship upper stage, a sight that we're now, I guess, getting a little bit more used to seeing now with this having been performed multiple times on the ship.
So the ship is coming back. Getting ready to come back now.
And unfortunately, we're going to have to say farewell to our friend Joel with Lab Padre. But before we go ahead and let you go, Joel, just want to get your thoughts on where the Starship Flight 6 mission has got to at this point, and what you're looking forward to with Flight 7. Obviously, recognizing that still got a little ways to go before this one is done and dusted.
Thanks for having me on. I think this flight has gone well. It's a bummer to not see the booster catch, but like everybody said, it'll be interesting to see what SpaceX says about it. But not the end of the world. We know they can do it. We expect to see it become a regular thing in the near future. Excited that the Raptor relight seemed to go well. I would not be surprised if Flight 7 doesn't have at least some Starlinks on it and an actual orbital launch. And I'm really looking forward to that. And really looking forward to seeing what kind of images we can see of this ship re-entry in daylight. It's been very interesting to see this start of re-entry here because of the dark sky. It's been we saw that plasma a lot sooner than we saw on previous flights. I think it was over 120 kilometers we started seeing the pink, which was very neat to see. And yeah, seen it a couple times now, but it's still amazing because of how it's becoming commonplace, even though it's a very new thing in the history of spaceflight, is seeing these kind of things live.
Yeah, certainly.
Once again, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're very glad to have you, Joel, and look forward to talking with you again in the future as we have many more flights of Starship to cover coming up, and so we appreciate you being with us today.
All right, thanks. See you guys later.
Take care. FT plus 44 minutes, 27 seconds and counting so far into this flight. Nice view of the aft end of the ship upper stage, and now a really great multi-view here from SpaceX. As the ship upper stage continues to progress through entry. As we continue to track the re-entry of Starship, do have a question coming in from as we're continuing to track the entry of the Starship upper stage. There are some now aerial assets over the Super Heavy booster remnants out in the Gulf of Mexico. We're pushing in pretty far with our camera here, so it's not super crisp, but you can see those two white dots that are above the horizon line appear to be a couple of helicopters that are in the area over what's left of the Super Heavy booster.
Got a ways to go yet.
And we are now well into the reentry phase. They passed the Von Karman line a couple minutes ago, so about 80 kilometers, a little under 80 kilometers in descending.
A good note, and as we're just now approaching peak heating here on the ship upper stage. Great angle off with a 6-person crew coming up this Friday, including a couple of repeat flyers from here in Florida. Want to listen to a quick update from SpaceX's Dan Hewitt?
As it was last flight, where we had a team of ship techs do just an otherworldly task, replacing the entire heat shield, thousands of tiles, installing a backup ablative, and that pretty much set us up to do a pinpoint landing on Flight 5. We did not do that with this one. We have some backup in those really sensitive areas around the flap, but this is an older generation heat shield. And knowing we weren't going to do that, we even went and removed some extra tiles. There are some missing tiles on the nose cone where we're testing some backups. There are some steel covered tiles in a couple of different spots. And there's also a whole lot more steel of the ship showing. As you guys talked about, we gave it a little bit of a haircut, a couple hundred tiles trimmed off the sides. And that's where we might have catch fittings in the future. But color's starting to come in. So it looks like things are going to start heating up, Kate and Jesse.
Yeah, fun fact, Dan, we actually removed 2,100 heat shield tiles from Starship in order to basically present that necessary receding line, which you kind of can see there in your view. Think back to previous flights, the heat shield line came up further on the vehicle, and just like Dan said, we want to test the vehicle beyond what we think it is capable of carrying based on our simulations and calculations. So once again, to just be super plain, don't be surprised if we see some wackadoodle stuff happen here. We won't be. There are a number of things that we are testing out intentionally to see what the ship can take.
Yeah, exactly. And knowing what those limits are will really help us design the vehicle of the future. Essentially, removing those tiles helps us remove a lot of weight from the vehicle, a lot of things that might potentially need refurbishment in the future. And the goal is to come up with a heat shield pattern or design that we don't have to refurbish. We can just continue to use it over and over again. And that's why we're changing some of those tiles and moving stuff around, removing a lot of those tiles, as Kate has been mentioning.
And some good words from the SpaceX commentators there, just listening in on the latest with this mission now, 51 minutes, 35 seconds and counting into this flight. We're anticipating the flip maneuver to come up at about T plus 1 hour, 4 minutes, 56 seconds. Then the landing burn set to begin about 5 seconds thereafter. So once we hit the 1 hour mark, things will start moving very quickly with the ship upper stage. We'll have to wait and see when SpaceX decides to start bringing in some of their marine assets for visuals, hopefully with a good bit of margin so we can see the full descent as it happens. As we're continuing to watch these views, did mention that the folks on the International Space Station were able to catch a view of the ship, of Starship, as it was making its flight. If we can bring that in here in just a second. Just doing some quick work behind the scenes to hear the call that ship is halfway through peak heating. It's now about 67 kilometers in altitude and descending. If you take a look right here as we bring this image in, the red arrow.
Have a few pictures of the launch. It looked pretty cool from orbit, and we're downloading them now on SSC-7, and they're with a bunch of other CEO pictures of cities at night. So it'll probably take, I'm just looking, it'll probably take another 10 minutes to get them downloaded.
That's awesome, Don, and I'm really glad you guys were up there and able to see it. We're looking forward to seeing the pics. Thanks so much for doing that and letting us know SSC-7.
And those communications you were just hearing were a recording from a chat between NASA astronaut and current International Space Station commander Sonny Williams, as well as NASA astronaut Don Pettit, relaying the visual that they got on Starship as it was launching down to Mission Control Center in Houston. So, Stephen, we were talking about the potential for that and, whether or not they'd be able to get a good visual given the time of day and the lighting, but it sounds like everything came together for at least that part of the mission for them.
Yeah, pretty remarkable. It's cool to hear Don Pettit radio down to Houston, the subject for the Starship launch. I think that's probably the first time we've heard those words from orbit, at least in a public downlink. Pretty cool.
Here it goes. Look at all that.
And I'll throw this to Zach first, but Stephen, you can join in if you've got some comments as well. Just as we're seeing some different lighting conditions with this reentry, wonder what your thoughts are as we're at this point in the reentry process as compared to flights 5 and 4. What you're noticing, what may be jumping out at you.
Well, everything seems to be pretty stable. Not a lot of rocking back and forth like we saw on, I believe that was flight 3. So, yeah, everything looks really good. It's pretty cool right now. They're starting to get into, it looks like the daylight, crossing into daylight right now. So, good views of, I think, I'm only seeing rear flap views, and I think there's one forward flap view there. So, haven't started to see any burn through yet, which is also a good sign. Yeah, I mean, everything looks surprisingly well, especially with those heat tiles that they had removed from the side. I don't see any glowing of the actual metal yet. So, yeah, it looks pretty promising right now.
Stephen, did you want to add anything as we're approaching the landing flip here in the next several minutes?
I just can't wait to see what it looks like in daylight. It's going to be really fascinating. We've seen this happen at night a couple of times before, and watching those videos has often been, kind of a challenge to try to figure out what exactly we're seeing in those videos at night. In daylight, I hope and expect it'll be much clearer.
Certainly, we can hope for the best, and fingers crossed that those marine assets are training well on the ship's planned position as it comes in. Getting some cool reflections on the top of the ship. And based off of the SpaceX commentary, they have completed peak heating at this point in entry. Now T plus 58 minutes, 33 seconds and counting. The next milestone coming up here will be the ship passing through the point of being transonic. It does appear, Zach, that we are seeing a little bit of possible burn through in the flap that you're seeing in the middle box on the screen, just at the forward tip there. I'm seeing that as you're seeing it.
Yeah, definitely looks like it's starting to get pretty hot up there. So I feel like it came a little earlier in the previous flights, but I could be wrong. I'd have to double check the timing on that. Be nice to see how the other one's looking, but I don't think we're going to get a view of that.
Yeah, it does not appear so, unfortunately. But a great view of the ocean below.
Going back down. No, you would be dead if you were on that because there's no oxygen. Or very little oxygen. Plus, you're going very, very fast. You're going almost 8,000 kilometers. It's slowing down pretty quickly. Now we're below 8,000.
One of the additional benefits of seeing this come down in the daylight, of getting a nice view of that forward flap where it was still glowing red. Should see some good actuating of the flaps here today with this. Now a little more than an hour into flight, as we're still watching the ship as it prepares for its final re-entry. Also keeping an eye on the remnants of the Super Heavy booster bobbing out in the waters of the Gulf of Mexico.
I think it's still on fire.
Still a good bit of it above the water here, which perhaps may not be surprising to some, but is certainly interesting to note.
Hey, come here. It's coming down even quicker now. Yeah, it's all done heating. It looks like it's pretty much done heating now. Yep. Came through the heating. Don't know.
SpaceX commentators note there is no plan right now to recover any part of the ship upper stage, as it seems there may be a plan to try and salvage part of the Super Heavy booster. We'll, of course, keep tabs on that in the hours and days to come.
Starlink. Yep.
Finally starting to get some reorientation of the ship now. Wow, that is an incredible view from the flaps.
Yeah, it's really striking the difference between a daylight and a nighttime reentry. Zach, with that vapor that we're seeing here, that the chill of the engines as it's preparing to relight for the landing burn? Is that what we're seeing?
Well, the Raptor chill should be on the side below the flaps, so that actually may be methane from the QD in the front, so that venting is pretty normal. You actually can see the Raptor chill vent just to the left of the flap, so there's a little bit coming from there, then some coming from the QD, and some of the RCS vents on the side of the ship as well, too.
It looks like we're less than a minute away from the landing flip here, so given the visibility that we've got right now, it should be quite spectacular. Hopefully we'll get a view from the water as well. Now 4 kilometers and descending. Call from SpaceX that Starship is still on a good trajectory as it begins to descend through the clouds here.
That is sweet.
Some great views as we were expecting, getting to level out in the belly flop. Standing by for the landing flip.
There go the landing burn.
There's the landing, or the flip.
And the landing burn.
And a great view of the Indian Ocean below.
Wow.
And look at that. The first daylight splashdown of a ship upper stage down in the Indian Ocean. And here's the buoy view.
It looks like it may not have exploded this time.
Well, stand by.
Oh, never mind. Wow. Looks like it cracked in half, possibly.
It certainly appears to have split pretty. Hopefully we get a shot back of the ship, but as we keep our eyes on that, we do have these live pictures of the Super Heavy booster. And you just can see some type of ship that's making its way out towards the Super Heavy, presumably part of the SpaceX fleet. They have asked folks to stay away from this area of the Gulf of Mexico, so presumably any ship that would be approaching would be approved.
The last one for the year.
Let's listen to Dan
Version of
Hewitt
ship
for some
coming soon,
final words.
so a lot more exciting launches coming up real soon here from Starbase. But I'll send us out this time. We'll see you guys next time.
Well, no real notes of color to add there, but as we begin to close things out from the conclusion of splashdown of the ship upper stage, I want to go ahead and bring our panel back in to give us their final thoughts. Zach, I'll start with you before we go to Stephen.